Hello, welcome to our podcast. This is podcast number 6, Your Mental Health Matters. We are having a topic today of ADHD. Now, I know we did this in our previous season, but this time it's going to be a little bit different because we have a special guest with us today, a parent, a father, a teacher, a principal, and someone who himself has ADHD. So we're going to get some great perspectives on this. The team here, of course, is Joni and myself. Joel is not here today to be a part of this podcast, unfortunately. He had a scheduling conflict, but we want to welcome you back. So first, let's introduce Chris Organ. Chris is our guest speaker, who is a principal at Greeley Road, and we're really, really happy to have you here. Welcome, Chris.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and I'll be honest, a little nervous.
That's okay.
But it's going to be fine, and I'm looking forward to learning and sharing some perspectives.
And you will have lots of great insight to give us, so we're really appreciative of that piece, because I think a lot of the things we see from our perspective, right, Joni? And then all of a sudden hearing your perspective as somebody who has ADHD, who has lived through dealing with all of the impacts of ADHD and all the things that go along with it. So maybe I'll just start off with a little bit of information for our viewers about ADHD. Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah. So ADHD sometimes, and there's 3 types. So there's the hyperactivity impulsivity type, there is the inattentive type, and then of course there's the combined type. This presents differently with different populations. Females, you may see more of the inattentive, less focus, maybe more withdrawn type. Oftentimes females, I hear, they don't get diagnosed until later in life.
That's true.
And it's misrepresented and thought to be anxiety. So I thought that was actually kind of interesting to talk about. We'll get into that more later. Basically, what I want to start off with is to help you understand that this is a neurodiverse disorder, which happens to the prefrontal cortex of the brain. What that all means is your brain, this is not something that is done to you through drugs or alcohol. Sometimes this happens through hereditary purposes. Sometimes if there's a father or a mother who has ADHD, the child will have ADHD, which could have some memory, some emotion issues, some attention issues. We're going to dig deeper into that. Joni?
Yeah, it's biochemical. It's definitely not something that is done to you. It's just something that is diagnosed in various stages of life. Chris, tell us more about how you were diagnosed.
How was it? Well, as a kid, all my report cards said, and every report card in elementary school, for background, my mother's a teacher, and my dad's a naval officer, so they understood structure. But every report card said, Chris could achieve much more if he sat down more often and talked less. And this is back in the mid-'80s.
And they didn't know yet that you had ADHD?
No.
Right. So they labeled you a bad kid?
Oh, yeah. I had very nice teachers, but I had my own desk in the office.
You're special.
Yeah, and it would frustrate my mother because I get a lot of phone calls home, and she would ask questions as to why can't she just behave. It wasn't her fault. She didn't know. My dad didn't know. Nobody knew what was going on.
And it wasn't your fault either.
No, and they were seeing it as, my dad's a beautiful man, but if you don't know what it is, it can come across as lazy, which is not the case, or you don't care. And it wasn't until grade 9, so 1993, where I started to get a little more serious trouble in school.
What did that look like? Tell us more about what the trouble looked like for those people who are watching who have a child who may be presenting with ADHD.
So in 93, we moved to a new area of town. I grew up in a lower socioeconomic area. I loved it, but it was north into Halifax, and a lot of people don't often choose to stay there. Now it's gentrified and beautiful.
Right.
I loved it there. But my parents decided to move to the South End, and I went to a different school. And I decided I'm not going to have the reputation of just some hyperactive guy.
Right.
And so I chose to have an edge and try to be tough.
So you put your armor on to protect you?
Yeah, maybe. Looking at it now, possibly. So I wasn't making friends any other way previously. Had to making friends.
Right.
And so we got into a lot of fights.
Okay.
The fights I would get into often were for the right reasons. I remember one time I helped a child who had special needs, and even at church on Sunday I was getting congratulated by some of the parents.
Really?
Because I took care of a bully who's been a bully for years.
So you had a little bit of a social justice piece that you wanted to provide that justice for all.
Yeah, but I still remember my mother being very upset. My dad, a little proud, a little upset, but it went on. Plus my marks were not strong.
Right.
My dad was spent a lot of time with me, which is awesome. My mother. They knew I was bright, but they couldn't figure out I was pulling off 50s and 60s.
Let's stop you there if you don't mind. Let's talk about that, because there is a misconception that when a person is diagnosed with ADHD, that they have a learning disability or they're a disorder of some sort, or academically they are less than. And that's not correct. This is
and I
about
was just going to say, a lot of the students that I work with are very intelligent.
very intelligent, and they've learned other ways to adapt around this. And as soon as you figure that out, you got the student. Academically, they're going to thrive. Right?
You know, I think grade 7 year, I remember working very hard, and I actually got honor roll that year.
Good for you.
Yeah, well, my mother kind of dragged me, kicking and pulling. Bless her heart. But she dragged me through that. And, in grade 8, kind of floundered. Grade 9, I went.
Right.
And it was then where I started going for all the doctor's appointments.
Okay. So now they started wondering.
Yeah, so a lot of service to my teachers, as we do now. I know the service were back in the time.
Right.
Went to a gentleman named Bud Farron, who was a psychiatrist, who had met with me, talked to my mother, had me do some tasks with them, puzzles and all that kind of stuff, etc. And during the survey, so he has ADHD. Now it's 93. People were like, what the heck is ADHD?
That sounds very scary, right?
And so the other part was, then it was this is like probably May or June, probably May. They started doing medication trials. So placebo 1 week. Well, they actually had, I remember the process. We had 3 or 4 jars, all looking the same. And I wouldn't know what pill I was taking each week. And the teachers would have to report upon what medication worked best.
So they want to do some tracking to see what worked. And I want to clarify for the audience as well that not every person with ADHD needs medication. There could be accommodations put in school, but this is just your story.
And it was really nice. I mean, they didn't. Teachers did not, and they were good teachers.
Right, of course.
But they didn't have the skills or the knowledge.
They don't. They didn't.
That we have now for ADHD and differentiated learning and inclusivity. So. They found a drug that worked for me for a while. I don't take medication anymore for that particular drug. It was pseudoephedrine, and
which is a stimulant.
And it had some side effects, but yeah. And then my parents decided the best thing for me was to switch to a different school, a small class size, and actually I was sent to Armbury Academy. It was a private school.
Lots of structure.
Lots of structure. I mean, I thought I was a tough guy in grade 9, and they put me in gray pants, white dress shirt, blue tie. And, surprise, and class sizes of 15.
Right.
And it was high academic expectations, but you couldn't get away with much.
Right. And Joni, would you, sorry, Chris, this is one of those moments that I think would be a great teachable for our audience. Can you talk about some of the accommodations we do in school now? So Chris is telling his story, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact of how far we've come.
Oh, yes.
Right? Because I want our audience to know that doesn't have to be their experience with their child or themselves who have.
No, it's changed so much now. Like, we have a lot of success with ADHD with our kids. In fact, teaching is adapted.
That's right.
To meet the needs of all students, and actually it's benefiting kids who are neurotypical. But sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Like, teachers are trained in the executive functioning skills and developing social skills and accommodating and having those different ways of learning. So some students have like seating, different ways of seating. They have the moving seats.
Flexible seating.
A rubber band around their desk so they can kick the band. They have fidget toys because we haven't really talked much about this piece, but part of the ADHD diagnosis, sometimes we see that hyperactivity, impulsivity specifically. So can you talk a little bit about that piece in a child, first of all? What did hyperactivity look like for you then in impulsivity?
Hyperactivity was, not being able to sit down. You got to remember back in this era of the 80s and all that stuff, it was very much, and loved my teachers, but a lot of it was directions on the board, showed in your worksheet, directions on the board. We had those wooden seats with the curve around with the one spot for it. I think I had an ink jar back in the.
You're not that old.
The desk may have been.
Right.
And you're kind of in rows. And you look at it now. We work in collaboration with kids. There's not a lot of. We've moved away from worksheets and more learning by doing. Right. And I think I would have thrived as a student in that environment. So you look at our school, so for me as a kid, I had a lot of detentions. for not getting work done.
Right. So that's the inattentive piece or the lack of focus piece, I mean?
I think it's hyperactivity, lack of focus.
Okay.
You're not going to be surprised with this one, but I would often get on my desk and talk to people.
You wouldn't talk.
I would. I would get on my desk and talk to everybody in the classroom and be a big distraction.
So you were the class clown?
But sometimes, for sure.
Okay.
For sure. I was, yep, a little bit of a class clown.
And so for our audience, again, I want to pause. Sorry, Chris.
No,
I
that's
want to
okay.
make sure. Sometimes these children, your children, are being presenting in a certain way in a school, and we see the child who is saying more, doing more, acting out more, being the funny person in the room. And it could be because they just can't regulate themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that they don't have the ability or the impulse control.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that something in their body's telling them they have to move, and they don't know how to articulate that in an age-appropriate way or an appropriate way in a classroom where you're supposed to sit behind a desk and just attend to your work. So of course they're going to
comes
act
out
out
in different behaviors.
Yes.
So they're going to talk to other students.
Yes.
They're going to turn around in their chair. They're going to
Yes.
spin. They're going to walk around.
Yeah.
And it's not their fault. It is not something they're doing on purpose. It's something that's happening within their body.
I remember my teachers. Again, they were good people, and I loved them to death because they were very kind. All my teachers were nice to me. I never had a mean teacher.
Yeah.
I had exasperated teachers, but I never had a mean teacher.
Exhausted teachers.
But I remember, sticker charts, and Chris would love the scratch sniff Snickers. We get more stickers, he'll clue in.
Reward systems.
Or like little tennis balls and high bounce balls. Chris will, pardon me. Chris will do better if we reward with high bounce balls, but they didn't know. And but yeah, the other part was when you're that kid who's always being told to sit down, do your work, give detentions. You're different then.
You are.
You're very different. I had this beautiful teacher named Mrs. What was her name? She was lovely, and she was very kind. And I'd go for her anything. But in grade 6, she knew what to do with me, and so she put me in a cubicle. And I don't mean a desk cubicle. I call them the Sunday school walls. They're steel with the cloth on each side.
The barrier almost.
So she had 2 at the back of the classroom, and she was giving direct instruction. She'd open up the front panel, because there was 3 of them, so I could pay attention, and she would close the wall.
So you had no distractions around you, but only on her.
And she made it beautiful. I had a Magic Johnson poster and a Larry Bird poster. This is 80s. And a Larry Bird poster, and I had a beanbag chair in the corner, and I could have a friend in the day to make it special.
Okay, so she was trying to include
you. She was trying to include
Right.
me. I did well, but it was, you're still different.
You're still different, and you're being singled out, and you don't even have an opportunity to interact with your peers because they don't have faith in you that you'll be able to do it appropriately, or.
And then you start to feel, and just not everybody, but I felt frustrated
Of course you did.
because I didn't know why I was always in trouble.
Right.
Why was I making my parents upset? Because they'd be upset when they get the phone calls. I mean, no parent loves to get a phone call from the principal. I mean, when the principal calls my mother to say, "Oh, Mrs. Organ there," no, it's Rose there. It's on a first name basis now.
They know you well enough,
They know you
right?
well enough, right? So you don't always feel the most confident.
Right. So that really impacted your childhood.
Oh yeah.
And so can we take another pause to look at you as a child going through that, being put on medication? Did it help, first of all?
The medication. See, when I was on medication, by that point I was 14.
Okay.
Yes, I believe it did help me.
Okay.
There were side effects, but it was probably when you're doing counseling and they give medication to a patient.
Right.
The medication is not what alone is not going to be enough.
You're right.
It's medication and counseling and strategies.
That's right.
So it's hard for me to say that the medication fully worked. I had a whole culture shift going to Armory Academy, where it was medication plus I was into a different school with smaller class size. Plus, I had a diagnosis.
Yeah, and you had structure, routine. You knew exactly what to expect. There were more boundaries, and there were more rules put in place that you had to comply to.
Yes.
So when you took the medication, you mentioned you had some side effects.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that,
Yeah,
because
okay.
parents
Parents.
often ask.
Yeah.
I will, but I want to preface it with medication back then is there medication now.
Bad.
And
Yeah.
it's much more evolved than it was back then. I mean, they were
Yes.
throwing any stimulant they could at you back in the day. I mean, Ritalin, etc. So I took pseudodextrin, which is a stimulant. And so part of it at first was insomnia. I could not sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, in that first year, they were going up doses, down doses.
They were trying to figure out what works best for you.
So they're doing their best, yeah.
Appetite
Mm-hmm.
was gone for the most part. Now maybe I could use the diet, but back then I was very thin.
Right.
I think I weighed 135 at grade 10, 11, and 12.
Right.
So you couldn't afford to lose more weight.
I could afford to lose weight.
Right.
I tried to work out and all stuff, and maybe I got to 150 by grade 12. But there was that part. Irritability was big.
So you're more irritated
Yeah.
on it.
Okay.
Yeah, a little more irritated. And again, this is not all medication. It's medication we're talking almost 30 years ago.
And I think that's a really good point you're making,
Yeah.
Chris, because these are things that parents are still worried about because they've heard
Yes.
all these tales of long ago.
What's
Right, well,
happening.
that's part of the stigma that you hear from
Yes.
long ago. One of those things long ago we talked about previously was this idea of a medical holiday.
Yeah,
You don't have to take medication on weekends.
right.
And that's baloney. In fact, that's not actually, it's proven now
Yeah,
that that's not the case because you're just regulating the child
that's
going
right.
up and off. And ADHD is not just an academic thing. It is a social thing. So when do kids socialize? On weekends. Well, if a kid's impulsive in the class and to work and somebody's are watching them, okay, right?
Yeah,
But if a kid's impulsive with a group of people, says the wrong thing or loses their temper,
Yeah.
that's not great for their social life.
no,
And you're doing more harm by taking them on their medical holiday.
that's right.
Yeah.
So
So if
many-
they're on a medication that works, stick with it.
Yeah, stick
right.
with it. Don't go off and on. Don't take these summer holidays. It doesn't, in my experience and the research I've been reading,
Yeah,
it doesn't work. Actually do more harm than good for the child.
mm-hmm.
But again, the medication was almost 30 years ago.
Right.
Things have changed. I talk to my parents now. And it's kind of funny when I've had a few parents come to me almost in tears. My child's diagnosed with ADHD. His life is ruined or her life is ruined. And I go,
Mm-hmm.
You're like, look at me now.
I'm like, how do I say this? I hate to say this to you, but your life's not ruined. It's going to be okay. I have ADHD. They're like, huh?
Yeah.
And they always give me that look of,
How is that possible?
because stigmas are out there.
And how can somebody thriving like you, a principal who's thriving in your career, have ADHD and survive it and do well, right? And parents are like, what?
Strategies and support.
Yeah,
The same skills my parents taught me when I was younger,
yeah,
I still carry over. I hated them as a child.
right.
I despised them as a teenager. But I fall back on them now. Remember, military, father,
Yeah.
teacher, mother. Like I say, the best thing my dad ever told me, and I think I mentioned this before, was the diagnosis is a tool, not an excuse.
Mhm.
And he was very clear on that. And so then it was, okay, now what are we going to do?
Right.
And so we talked about scheduling. And he was very good at this because of the military way of,
Yeah.
because kids with ADHD thrive on structure and routine.
Say that again because I
Yeah,
want everyone to
that's
hear
all.
that.
So kids with ADHD, and I know this from working in a camp with all ADHD students in Ontario called Camp Kodiak, they thrive on structure and routine.
Yeah.
They need to know what's coming up next.
That's right.
It reduces their anxiety, and then get their brain wrapped around what they have to do next before it hits. So for example, if you're in a classroom as a teacher, and you're an elementary teacher, not so much high school or junior high, but there's still things that you can do. You need to have your daily schedule on the board.
Yeah.
Because the ADHD child, while you're teaching math, maybe your first block, all they care about is what's happening the rest of the day. I don't know what's happening the rest of the day. I'm really sure what's happening the rest of the day. Do I have the stuff I need? Did I do any homework? Oh my God, I don't know what's going on. And they've lost your whole math lesson.
Yeah.
All right? Now they're anxious. They're anxious now they're going to be outbursts. When you're teaching junior high like I did, and so you have a science block, I would break down, here are our goals.
That's
We have
really
this to do,
good.
this to do, this to do, this to do, this to do, here's what you need. And so they would ask me, what's next? What's next? And UBD, would often do this generally in unit planning, would help us as well.
Yeah.
And so kids thrive on structure. We had kids who were, by 19 I knew it was ADHD.
Right.
I was ADHD for 5 years. I went to a job fair and there's a gentleman named Dave, and Dave said to me, huh, you like sailing? I go, yeah, I used to sail. Oh, we need sailing instructor at the ADHD camp. I'm like,
You're like, I'm it.
yeah, Dave, his name was Dave Stock, and he was a wonderful man. He was an educator from Mississauga who decided to open up a camp just for kids.
Oh,
We call them
beautiful.
neurodivergent now,
Yeah.
but ADHD and other
Right.
disabilities, mostly ADHD. And the whole thing, because he used to take his kids camping
Yeah,
and field trips. He's a principal as well.
that's wonderful.
And he would learn that they love structure. People like a set routine. It takes the anxiety out of it.
Yeah, and
Let's
Yeah.
stop you there, because
Yeah.
I think that's a really good part for Joni and I to dig into from a teaching perspective, from a parent perspective. That structure in the day is so important.
Mhm.
Telling the child what's happening next, like you're at home and you have going for a holiday and you see your child who has ADHD is just all over the place. We're going to do this next. This is what we're going to do next. Have a plan, have some structure. Give them only a little bit. Don't tell them what's going to happen at the end of the day. Just tell them what they need to get through right now, right? That's something that parents can do so that their child isn't starting to already unravel thinking of everything else and they can't focus on this.
And even the day-to-day stuff, like what's your morning routine? And
Yes.
then when you get home from school, and just have that structure in place so that they know what's happening.
It's
It's
so
funny.
important.
It's funny you talk about the routine on vacation. My wife, bless her, she's an LAC and then the school division. And I think that gives her a little more perspective and patience and skill to work with her husband.
Right?
But,
Because she deals with special education. She deals
yes.
with,
I am her her students are me 20 years ago, 30
right,
years
so
ago.
she gets it.
And she gets it. And we had a Disney trip years ago. And she had it scheduled down with all the trip, what do you call it, the fast pass and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And she had it scheduled out. And I thought it was for the kids. And I realized,
Nope.
and the whole family went.
Right.
It was for me. I was like, what are we doing this morning? We're going here, then here. I'm like, great. I felt good. I can relax. There's no
Yeah.
worry about time. And so it's funny you say that because my wife does that to me.
See, but
So-
it helps you as an adult.
Yeah.
And this reminds me of
Yeah,
something you
that
said
works.
to us off camera another
Yeah.
time. You talked about some of the things you had to do as an adult to help control your ADHD.
Yeah.
Do you remember some of those things she's talked about?
Yeah. So the first thing it is, I always have to write everything down I'm going to do
right.
in a calendar with time slots.
Yeah.
I'm going to Google Calendar more now, but I still think I like the paper better, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Reinforces it, writing it down.
Because
Yeah.
writing it and seeing it on paper is different than just, Google
I
Calendar.
got an invite. Exactly, very different.
Yeah.
It's reinforcement.
It is.
And so some people can do a list. So if I talk too fast, let me know. And they go, I have to do this. That's no good for myself.
Okay.
I have to say, and I can give you my routine. 7:45 to 8 o'clock supervision, 8 o'clock to 8:10 announcements, 8:10 to 8:20 walk the hall.
So you got it all down pat because that helps you stay on task.
It stays on task, and I don't miss things.
Okay.
Let's talk about that for a second
Yeah.
because I don't want to reel that because that's a really big part of ADHD. When you talk about kids who are struggling with assignments and not handing things in, they're
got to
missing
schedule it.
things because they don't have it scheduled in. That is not something they're doing because they're lazy. That is not something they're
It's
doing.
a skill you have to learn.
It is, and it's because they also become time blind. So there's this time blindness where they get so caught up in something that either they can't stop it or they need that immediate gratification in the moment. ADHD kids,
Yeah, they
adults,
hyper-focus
they
on whatever they
hyper-focus,
do.
right?
Yeah.
So they're right into it. So these children who are not getting their assignments in, it's not because they don't want to. It's just they don't have the focus to tend to tasks, or they're off doing something else, or they're in that excitable, hypervigilant state where they're really hyper, and it's hard for them to stay on task.
Yeah, it's very hard. And that's why you also got to schedule in breaks.
Yes.
So I schedule my walks, and I do 4 supervisions a day at my school.
Right.
My staff, they're going to see this and giggle. They're going to say, "He's so nice doing supervisions."
Right.
It's a win-win.
I would say it
get
is.
out of the office.
Why?
I get to go outside and
Yeah.
play with watch the kids, but also like my kids in the playground, right? I get to be outside and enjoy being with the kids. I get to take a break from the office and walk the hallways or talk to the kids at recess. It's my chance to get out of what can be a very
Sedentary.
environment, especially with all this paperwork to do
Yeah.
in an office, dealing with parents who I love and the kids, and then you want to say, okay, I need to get out,
Right.
and so I do that, and it works.
Okay, you do that, and you're doing it purposely because you know your ADHD demands it, commands it. Otherwise, what happens?
If I don't, then I actually become less productive.
Okay, and what does that look like?
So I will, if I don't do that, I will phase out of what I'm doing.
Right.
I will start to look at other things. I'll check my phone frequently.
Yeah.
on things that are not worth checking my phone on.
Right.
I'm not checking emails, so I might check Facebook and scroll, and I go,
And you get lost in
And then
something.
you
I
get
get lost
yeah.
something, or YouTube, and it's like, okay, well, no. And that's also not scheduled, right? And so, scheduling, knowing when you have to take your breaks,
Yeah.
leaving space in your schedule for things to happen, because in a classroom, teachers know this,
Yeah.
that things pop up. As a parent, our parents know this. Things pop up. You
Yeah.
can't schedule every single minute and, we'll make God laugh, make a plan.
Right.
You got to have chunks in there to allow a little flexibility.
Of course.
And as a principal, everything pops up all the time.
Yeah.
It's whack-a-mole.
So you,
Yeah.
as a principal, actually works well having ADHD because there's so many things going on. You're able to go boo boo and just jump
Yeah.
all over the place. But
Yeah.
you've told me before, and we talked about this in meetings, where your phone's there and you need to concentrate on me. You will flip your phone over and put it away because your mind, you're already starting to look at that if something pops up there.
Yeah.
And you've told me that some of the things you do within your own body, the way you handle yourself.
Actually, right now I'm doing it.
That's why I'm calling you out on it. What
Yeah.
are you doing now and why?
First of all, I put my phone's in my pocket.
Yeah.
Usually, if I'm in a meeting, I'll put my phone upside down.
Yeah.
I'm off to the right or the left, out of hand reach, to be quite honest. Bring her off. Sometimes I should, with my wife, I kind of leave it on and I shouldn't. But
Right.
even right now, the way I'm sitting, I didn't realize I was doing it. Because I'm a fidgeter, I've crossed my leg, I'm leaned back, my fingers are internet connected, and I'm actually doing my thumbs.
Yes.
Otherwise, I'm doing this, and I'm shifting and I'm moving, and I'm shifting and I'm moving, or I'm
Yeah. So those are strategies you learned, and you're not medicated. So as
No.
an adult, you have learned to do these things, and you don't need that stimulant.
That
no,
you did before.
I don't. There's a part, and I'll be completely honest, there's a part of me that is curious what would happen if I went back on medication.
Right.
Because there's things I could do better.
Right.
And I've found other ways to make it work. Like we talked about it before, the impulsivity of emotion.
Mhm.
I try not to be quick to react,
Right.
but I can be. So I wonder if I can get better medication.
And I respect your honesty, and
Oh, yeah.
that's, as an adult, having to deal with that.
But the other part is I've gained the skills to do what I have to do to make my job work.
Yes.
I've learned as I've been married for 20 years almost.
Right.
As I became a husband, what works and what does not work.
Right.
A lot of it does not work. And with my children at home, that's something I'll talk about later on, or maybe now. The one thing I had a real hard time with was my oldest. I had this big fear of, I hope he's not like me.
Right.
And I was asking everybody, think he has ADHD? Think he has ADHD? Think he has ADHD?
I remember you asking me that.
Yeah, and Miss Marilyn Luco, who was his kindergarten teacher or ECV teacher, thinks he's ADHD.
Yeah.
He's fine.
Right.
He's fine. He's
Because
okay.
It's your fear because of everything you had to go through and
Maybe.
overcome.
At the time, I don't think I realized that.
Right.
I was like, I don't want to be a bad kid. I don't want to be a bad kid. I don't,
Yeah.
And it wasn't until 3 or 4 years ago I was like, he's actually okay.
Yeah.
He'll be okay.
Right.
He doesn't need me to be on him for everything. But that was kind of a stressor
Yeah.
for a while. But as you get better with your
But to be
parents,
honest, in having you as a father, it would be beneficial because you could coach him through those moments.
Yeah, you
And help
think
them
it'd be
with
beneficial, but sometimes
Yeah.
my reactive is like, I told her to do this. I've been there before. Why are you doing this?
Right.
Like even this,
You're both doing this.
yeah, impulsivity.
Yeah.
As an adult, we make impulsive purchases, and I'm not sure if it's ADHD or just being impulsive in general.
Right? Maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, so I bought a really stupid thing for myself: electric off-road skateboard. It goes 30 kilometers an hour. Has
30 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, and it's gone meant for trails. Has wheels with this big. I put it on speed 2 when I cruise around Timberley or I cruise around the campsite. I told my son, don't put it on speed 4. Do not put it on speed 4. He came back 20 minutes later, road rash all over his body last weekend. Then I said, I know what you did. You put it on speed 4. No, Dad, I did not do that. Yes, you did.
Because you know.
I know where his brain is. Meanwhile, he's road rash from here down to here, down to here. And I'm angry because I'm like, why didn't you listen to me? I didn't say it, I didn't show it. I was like, more like sigh and exasperation. Next day he goes, I put it on speed 4, Dad.
Right.
I'm like, I know you did because you're your father's son.
That's right. So some of this is learned behavior. Some of this, because he doesn't have ADHD.
No, he has other issues.
Right.
But But yeah, no. But it's like I've been there before, done that before, so I don't get worked up like that kind of stuff too much.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, been there before, done that.
Yeah.
But no.
What about the impulsivity, Chris, within you? Because you've said that you've heard of other people as adults. Like, as children, as impulsivity, what do we see, Joni? You know, what are the typical things we're seeing in a child who
Well,
has
the
impulsive
typical is
behavior?
like the hyperactivity and
Yeah.
just the impulsiveness of like, oh, well, you had mentioned the emotion, like 0 to 60,
Mhm.
and just reacting to things. So the social skills are impacted and the ability to focus and things
And that's
like
something that people have to realize, and not have to. I would like them to realize with teachers and parents is there's a little bit of a lack of a filter.
Yeah.
You know, most people say, I have a thought,
Yeah.
should I say it?
That's right.
Then I speak it. I go, whoop, right to speak it.
No filter. It just
Right.
comes right out.
Comes right out. And when you have children, and again, I learned how to cope with that, right? And was, you know, I was brought up really well by my parents and my grandparents and stuff to be right and wrong and stuff. And very patient people, my Nana especially. I had a good network.
Yeah.
But you take a kid in grade 3 or grade 2 who dysregulated ADHD, and a kid takes, I'll give you an example, what happened today. A kid takes their seed I gave them, our trees are blooming, right? And I gave them this little seed to show them the seed, how it worked. And the kid took it, just to look at it, and he just went right to, Kara, and
Yeah.
screamed at the kid and hit him.
Yeah.
There's no pause, think, react.
Yeah.
But that's an emotional filter.
Mm-hmm.
The child wasn't trying to be bad.
No.
The child wasn't trying to be a bully. The kid thought that something was his, was stolen.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking, I should get Mr. Organ or I should get my teacher,
Yeah.
he went right to
React.
react.
Yeah.
And yes, it was physical, but it was based off an emotional
Which is
reaction.
part of the ADHD piece, right?
Yeah,
because there's
exactly.
the emotional reactivity, the physical reactivity
Mhm.
that happens, or impulsivity. As an adult, you may be better at controlling those emotions that come out,
Mhm.
but some adults get caught in the trap of drinking too much, doing drugs,
Yeah.
gambling,
Exactly,
shopping,
yeah.
driving too fast.
Yeah, we were talking with some of those, well, I did that when I was younger.
Right.
Yeah, I had a big car crash when I was younger for going too fast. You think about the stats in recovery for addictions, I
Yes.
think it was 25%
25%.
are diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
Those who have ADHD are a much higher rate of addiction issues,
Right.
especially with gambling,
Yeah.
alcohol. Those with ADHD as adults have a much higher divorce rate,
Yeah.
especially if you're undiagnosed and unmedicated.
So I'd like to stop you there for a second because that's a fantastic point that I think we really should nail home with parents specifically. We are not telling you that you have to go out and get your child assessed and that's what you have to do. But if you're seeing things that make you go, there's some flags there, right? Then maybe it is to talk to a physician because there are assessments out there. There's the Vanderbilt, there's the SNAP. You don't need to know those names, but those assessments a doctor will give you, and there's a self-report. So if it's an adult, they would actually report it themselves. But if it's a child, the parents would report, the teachers would report, they would compare, and then a diagnosis could happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that ADHD needs to have a medication either once a
No.
diagnosis is there, because there are accommodations, as Chris mentioned earlier, structure, routine, writing things down, doing things to help with the environment, like elastic bands on the desk or ability to walk around. But if they do need medication, it is important to explore.
I think it's important to be open to the idea.
Yes.
And I think that one thing that I hear from parents for the last 20 odd years, whether they work to the camp in Ontario or as a teacher or as a principal, is they want their kid to be labeled.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to go for the diagnosis. I understand that.
Yeah. However.
But if you avoid diagnosis, it's not going to make the ADHD go away or the symptoms go away. And it's not going to help build strategies for that child's success.
Because they can be very successful once they have a diagnosis, because then accommodations can be put in
And like
place.
you said, the diagnosis
thrive.
is a tool.
Yeah, and as my father said, and it's funny when parents speak to you and you don't remember things or you brush it off, but just diagnosis is not a tool. It's a tool, not an excuse, my father told me.
That's right.
What he was kind of getting the point was, it's a tool. Now we're going to have to figure out a strategy to get through this.
Of course, because if you don't, the
Right.
alternative is that a child will start looking for things, or their behavior will escalate, or downward,
think-
whatever.
you think
It's
what's-
searching ways to cope.
They
Right,
are.
and you
they
think
are.
for, self-medication, or you think about the ways that kids are going to find impulsivity. And I did impulsivity stuff like,
Yeah.
really stupid things like, jumping in the lake in the middle of winter on New Year's Eve because I thought I'd be impressing girls when I was like 18. That was really stupid of me.
Really?
Yeah, really dumb. Driving too fast when I was 19 and having a major car crash, or, being a daredevil kind of guy.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, if I build a bunk bed on the weekend, I'm sore for like 4 days.
But that's age. That's not ADHD.
That's age.
Sorry, Chris.
No, that's age. But if you don't get the diagnosis, you're not able to put in the safeguards and the strategies to prevent your child or give your child the skills to have success.
That's right. And then what
And-
happens?
And then you have the risk factors that kind of pop up, and you have the
Right.
failure, and then you have the kid feeling that they were stupid, or that they are just different, or the world doesn't make sense for them, or they are angry,
Yeah.
and it goes on and on. So there's that factor. And the label part, when you say, people say, "Oh, I'm ADD."
Right.
I go, "That's not your name."
Right. It
Right.
doesn't define you.
I'm, my name is, I'm Chris, and I work with ADHD.
Yeah.
I work around ADHD.
Yeah.
I can't avoid ADHD.
No, it's involved in every part of your life, right? You've engrossed yourself in it. You've learned to adapt and work around it, but it doesn't make you who you are.
But I do understand the label in this, and the stigma, and I'm not sure who's going to make the final cut, to be quite honest, but I'm going to tell you next.
Well, this is a full thing. There's no editing.
Oh,
so,
boy.
So you
Well,
can choose to
I'll
whether or
share.
not.
I'll share. Years ago, we're talking 12 years ago,
Right.
I was applying for a vice principal job, and I heard that somebody was very hesitant because they don't want an ADHD vice principal
Wow.
because stigma.
Stigma.
They did not know, and the person who told me this was a very good source
Yeah.
and a very good man,
Yeah.
and he advised me not to mention it again in an interview.
Okay.
I came to an interview because the question was along the lines of, if you have a child with ADHD, how would you support them and how could you relate?
Right.
Well, I have
Wow.
ADHD and I have strategies.
Uh-huh.
When that came out,
Right.
somebody said, I don't feel comfortable having an ADHD vice principal
Right.
in our ranks. So I understand the stigma. It's there. Luckily, the school board, looked past that and looked at my past successes and the time we put in, and
So it was an unwarranted fear. There was nothing it was based off except for the old view of what ADHD was.
Right.
Yeah.
right. So there was that. So I understand why parents are a little worried,
Yeah.
but you think about all the successes that ADHD people do have.
Right.
Like
They
they're
have typical
creative.
lives. Yes.
They're very creative. You will not find. It's very rare to find a lazy ADHD person. They are
Lots
working.
of energy.
They are lots of energy. But also a lot of determination.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hear things like, "Well, he got done. He is so energetic." Yeah, but he or she may be really focused and working really hard.
Yeah.
Because energy alone is not
Yeah.
enough. It's energy combined with learning how to harness your energy
That's right. That's
towards
right.
a topic. So, but I understand the stigma.
And I just want to speak a little bit about, we're talking about the hyperactivity part. We haven't really focused in on the inattentive or the side that we may see in more females with regards to they may be internalizing it and it may be coming across as depression, right? It
Yeah.
may look more depression because they're more compliant as children
Yeah.
or they appear to be more compliant.
Mhm.
So, and then they get diagnosed when they're in their 18, 19 or the early adult years and sure enough they have ADHD. And a lot of the parents I've talked to over the years, I didn't think my girl had ADHD because she never ran around.
All they look at is the hyperactivity. And to be
Hyperactivity.
fair, the squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of
It
thing.
sure does.
If the kids in the class who are hyperactive and are impulsive ADHD,
Yeah.
They're going to be
or
noticed.
combined,
Yeah.
they'll be noticed. The child in the back who's quiet
That's right.
but is disorganized,
Yes.
is not getting the work in, can't find a single thing or looks to shell it every day because they don't know how to get their day started, who can't make friends and keep friends, that's a big one. And it's huge for our younger students.
Yeah.
Those are signs you look for with from my end
Yeah.
with ADHD and females.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I'm glad you gave that list because that is a real big piece of it.
You know, and think about how everybody wants to be loved, everybody wants to be liked.
Yeah.
I think it's almost more so if you have hyperactive ADHD, you, generally speaking, lend yourself being a better athlete.
Right.
I'm not a great athlete, but I played high school sports,
Right.
right? And I played a little bit of college sports. And so a lot of people will forgive a lot of things if you play sports.
Because you're doing something really well.
Right.
And they're focusing on that.
Right? And you get
Okay.
hypoattentive.
Yeah.
If you are not hyperactive or impulsive ADHD, and you're just inattentive,
Yeah.
you're a space cadet.
Right.
People label you a space cadet.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, they're daydreaming a lot.
They're
and they just
daydreaming a
don't look
lot.
like
They don't care about school. They don't want to make friends. Maybe they try to make friends a bunch of times and it's failed because they don't know how to pay attention to a conversation. Or they just want to talk to themselves all the time. Ironic. You know, things like that. So it's really important that we're on the lookout for those in our young, I often say female,
Yeah.
but it's not always female, and our inattentive ADHD students.
I think that's a really important part of this, and we need to look at some final ways to wrap up this segment with regards to what we do, how we do it, and what supports we have. So I think that should be our next segment to talk about is how that looks in our children in school when we chunk down their work, when we have teachers making these accommodations for them, when they are either medicated or not, or trials on different medication and some tracking is being done so the teacher can monitor and say this is working or this isn't.
Yeah.
Because I hear parents say all the time, my child can concentrate for hours on video games. Don't tell me they're
Hypoattentiveness.
exactly.
Yeah, and I can do the same thing. I can't play video games except for Christmas, otherwise I'll do nothing else.
Right.
So I have to finish it.
Yeah.
But in the classroom, you know, and I got a good staff, and I've been around in numerous schools. I've rich and varied experiences, as the former superintendent told me. And I know what great work our teachers in the district are doing.
Yeah.
Across all the elementary schools and the junior highs. I've been everywhere. You know, but some of the things that I do see that works with younger students is, especially our grade 1s and 2s, I have a few kids in my mind right now.
Right.
Those breaks, scheduled breaks,
Scheduled breaks.
not just I need to leave the classroom right now.
Yeah.
You know, whether we have sensory room time every day for the child. We have one child who we have make work projects
Right.
in the office. Not because he's not going to learn,
Right.
but if we give him that 15 minutes of today, for example, I love my in a platonic way,
Yeah.
my admin assistant.
Yeah.
She always saves the boxes from
'Cause
any
she
of our
knows.
orders. She knows we have a young man who'll come down and can use work with those boxes, or she'll save crates of paper for him to move. And today's
Yeah.
thing was we had a whole bunch of new supplies coming from phys ed, and they came in these big, massive air pocket plastic popples, things that had been popped.
Oh, that would be
There were a
amazing.
row of like 40 of them.
Yeah.
And he danced on those for a good 5 minutes. Pop, 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 pop. He loved it. That was the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
He had me jumping on him.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't see that kid the rest of the day. He
Right.
needed a break. He was stimulated,
That's right.
got the energy he needed, didn't require something that afternoon.
Right.
But you know, that's the other problem about a school. It's not just the teachers.
That's right.
Our EAs are fantastic.
Mhm.
You know, they know, your EAs will probably know more about your child in your class than you
That's
ever
right.
will.
Yeah.
Especially junior high or high school, because they are with that kid all day long for a one-on-one.
That's
You see them for an hour a day. By October, they've already spent more time than you will all year with that child. Your secretaries or admin assistants, they've been around all the kids.
Yeah.
So it takes a team.
Yeah.
And so accommodations for us are simple things like the office work or the heavy work we call it, scheduled breaks. My grade 1 teacher has amazing skills with breakout space in the classroom.
Mhm.
So she has a cool down zone.
Right.
She has tons of manipulatives in the classroom.
Manipulatives means things for them to play with.
Play with, move around with,
Yeah.
wobble chairs. We have lots of flexible seating. Rick Thorne was very big on that at Christina Gordon School.
Yeah.
And so we carried that over to, because I used to be at Christina Gordon School, so we try to
Yes,
carry
yes,
that as
we
much as we
do.
can over to Greeley Road.
So I think of some of these accommodations, like they could work for any kid.
Yeah, that's the thing that people don't realize. Accommodations is not making it easier for one kid. It's not about making it easier, making it fair, making it equitable.
Yeah.
But what works for some kids, usually works for all kids.
And they
Right.
all would benefit from it, so it's
Right.
a win-win.
So yeah, all our kids, you end up using the flexible seating.
Yeah, exactly.
All our kids end up going, God, I'm able to, yeah, sure, go ahead and take one. It's not an issue.
Yeah.
They're not throwing around the classroom. They're sitting there playing with whatever they're playing with.
And it's helping them adapt to accommodate them so they could do their work and succeed.
They with clear and definite and chunked instructions. Well,
Yeah.
who could have benefit from that?
That's right.
All the kids
All
benefit.
kids.
All
So you're
kids
not
benefit from that.
singling out the ones that with ADHD.
Right.
That's right.
You
So
know?
I think this is great because I know we have to wrap up this segment. What is the one takeaway that you would want all parents to know?
Parents to know? One takeaway, that's difficult because there's so many things.
Okay, top two.
Top two, okay. First of all, the kids are not trying to annoy you on purpose. They are doing the best they can. They love you very much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing, don't be afraid of a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Because that will give you the chance to help set a path forward for your child's success. There was a lot of stigma back in the 90s when I was getting diagnosed.
Yeah.
My parents, you think it's bad now. In the 90s, it was, you know,
Yeah, that's
they
right.
had no clue what it was, especially early 90s, late 80s. My parents had the bravery, to be honest, you know, to put me in, have me tested, and then worked really hard. And I was resilient as a teenager on giving me the skills to have success.
Right.
And we butted heads
Of course you did.
like crazy.
Yeah.
But without them,
So
getting me
good support
diagnosed, they
system.
wouldn't have been able to put the supports in place.
Yeah.
They would have stuck spaghetti to a wall.
Right.
But with a diagnosis, at least now you have a goal net,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's something to actually aim for.
Yeah,
So-
I like that analogy. That's a good way. That's kind of like Joel. He always has little
Yeah.
jingles, or little things he says to kind of wrap it up and bring it together. It gives them a goal net, something to aim for.
Yeah.
So that diagnosis will help their child thrive.
Right.
And that's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
That's what we want. That's what we want
Mhm.
as parents, as educators, as counselors, as principals,
Mhm.
right? We want our children to thrive. Joni, do you have any takeaways that you want to mention?
I like the analogy of if you've got the diagnosis,
Yeah.
use it. Like
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
treat it as a tool,
Yeah.
not an excuse. Like I
Yeah.
love that.
And I think my takeaway from this is listen to your children and work with what you have and accommodate them, and they'll thrive,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yep.
And be
just because
patient.
they have
Be
these,
patient.
these symptoms
Yeah.
doesn't mean they have ADHD.
that's
so
right. That's a good point.
Yeah, that's a
Could be
point.
something
Where
else.
yeah, people often say I'm so ADHD or I have ADHD. No, you have one or two things that kind of are similar to ADHD.
Right.
There's a whole gamut of things that happen in conjunction at the same time for you have ADHD, and it's not just disorganization.
That's
It's
right.
not just a hyperactivity. It's also social emotional regulation. It's not understanding reading faces. It's a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
So just because your child may be a little hyper one day because they ate too much chocolate does not mean that they have ADHD.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So there are a lot of myths out there. There are a lot of things that are not quite representing what ADHD really is.
Yeah.
But talk to your physician, get the answers from your physician, talk to the child's teacher, talk to the principal, talk to the counselor.
Mhm.
But gather information, track information, go to your physician for the proper diagnosis and the proper treatment plan.
Yep.
And I think that's what it comes down to, because at the end of the day, we just want our kids to survive.
And thrive, I should say.
Yeah,
not
thrive. We want F and PhD in every school.
Yeah,
There's not a teacher in the world that wants their children to do well.
that's right.
There's not a parent in the world that does not want the best for their children.
And like you say, these strategies can work for anyone.
Yeah.
You know,
For
they're-
anyone.
Yeah. So with that being said, I think we'll be wrapping up. Finally, I think what we want everyone to know is thank you, Chris, for being a part of this.
Oh,
This
no
was
worries.
amazing, and you've done an amazing job of working through your ADHD symptoms. Your speech, and I know you're okay with me saying this
Oh,
because
yeah,
we talked
fine.
about this off camera. You're talking slower. You're not fidgeting. So you're doing a lot right now just to contain.
Yeah, well,
Chris.
practice. a lot of practice.
So I
For many
appreciate it.
years, yeah.
And this is fantastic because we're getting to see this side, and the parents are getting to see this side, and the educators are getting to see this, and hopefully you've learned a few things.
Yeah.
So
Great
thank
success
you
story.
for.
Just don't be afraid of diagnosis.
Yeah,
No,
thank you
it's-
for joining us.
Yeah, I love being here. I was surprised and I was nervous, but
This was
it
great.
was okay.
This
It's
was
fantastic because
Your mental health matters.
That's right.